Narito tayong muli sa 59th UP National Writers Workshop at magpapatuloy po tayo sa ikalawang sesyon para sa araw na ito. Sa kalahatan ay nasa panglimang sesyon na po tayo. Ngayon naman po ay tatalakayin natin ang proyektong Hey, It's Matty, Fiction in English. Ito po ay isinulat ni Binibining Jonely Reynes Santos at kasama po natin ngayon ang kanyang moderator, si Professor Ana Sanchez. Narito na po si Professor Ana Sanchez.
Magandang umaga sa lahat. Mula kay Masi ni Maynard ay tutungo tayo kay Mati ni Joji. So naatasan kami gumawa ng introduction pero may kasama itong craft lecture no dahil gusto ko lang i-introduce hindi lamang yung ating writer and expert no when it comes to special needs tsaka special education. Pero pati na rin yung ano yung stakes, kumbaga no, ano yung nakataya sa mga ganitong akda, ha? So meron po akong PowerPoint presentation dahil nerd ako. Just kapag merong ganitong inaatas nagpa-PowerPoint tayo. So kung pwede pong simulan, yun. So introduction to session 5, first slide. Una, ito po si Teacher Joji, no? Joji Reynes Santos, yung gamit niyang byline dun sa una niyang libro. So kinuha ko mula sa bio note niya, emphasize ko lang na siya ay veteranong special ed at literacy, special education and literacy specialist. Nakapagturo na siya sa iba-ibang uri ng mga learner, from school children, child workers, educators, to prisoners in the New Bilibid prison. No? So base sa pagkakaintindi ko ay advocate siya ng neurodiverse learning, no? At ng learners. Co-founded Candent, a learning center that caters to persons with diverse learning needs. And to summarize, no, and this is something that she puts in her poetics essay as well, advocating for inclusion led her to spearhead peace summits, organize inclusive camps, and write stories that aim to give voice to individuals who operate differently. So, introduce ko rin yung una niyang libro dahil parehong mundo ito nung nasa manuscript. So, para itong sequel, no? And of course, you'll hear from the writer a bit more later about this. So, this is Inside Daniel's Head, published by Adarna in 2018. It's been described and overtly introduced by the protagonist as a novel without a plot. So, it's told from the point of view of Daniel, whom you may know from the manuscript. No? Siya yung kapatid ni Matty, na even though in the first book the diagnosis is specified, may behavior, fixation, sensory processing issues, therapies and coaches, etc., that fit the profile for autism or autism spectrum disorder. The book has apparently been vetted by 3 specialists, 1 parent, and 1 quote-unquote high-functioning PWA before publication. I put quotes dun sa high-functioning na term kasi even though that's often used, marami ring nagsasabi ngayon these days na hindi ito quite accurate na labeling, no? And then the second book, Hey, I'm Matty, is told from the POV of Matty, Daniel's younger brother. All right, next slide. Next slide po. Okay. So yung focus ko ay developing character and plot in inclusion literature. So ang definition na inclusion literature, according to Sharon Andrews 1998, literature about disabilities. Actually, bahagi rin ito ng isang subgenre sa children's at YA lit called problem fiction. And of course, our expert, Sir Eugene Evasco, can later talk more about this if he wants to. But specifically for when it comes to inclusion literature, kasi dalawang pwedeng audience niyan, disabled readers, representation matters and it reduces feelings of loneliness and isolation. For non-disabled readers, it promotes awareness and more importantly, empathy. And I want to emphasize that there's a difference between empathy and sympathy or pity. Okay, which is why I think it's important, no, as writers, to ask questions like, how do we represent characters with disabilities, and does the plot allow us to get to know the characters better or keep us hooked long enough to do so? Which is why these two are, I think, things that we can focus on later during the discussion. So next slide. Ito yung isang rallying cry ng disability advocates. And here I'm referring specifically to disability communities. Napakalawak kasing field nito, napakaraming boses, no? At napakaraming perspectives how to view disability. So hindi porke, for example, individually may kilala ka ng disabled na person, ay automatically yun na agad ang pagkakakilanlan natin sa disability. Kasi sa totoo lang, napakaraming perspectives tungkol dito. So 3 major conceptual models would be the medical model, which locates the problem, no, the disability as a problem in the body of the person. No? The social model, which locates the problem as having been as being a problem of access. No? So halimbawa, hindi nakakapasok ang isang estudyanteng may wheelchair kasi walang pinaprovide, walang mga elevator, walang ramps, walang pinaprovide na classroom sa first floor, mga ganun. And dahil ang complex ang experience ng people with disabilities, meron ding parang middle ground, the individual environment relationship, no? Not solely medical, not so social problem. But in the next slide, see that again, not at least ang perspectives, no? So yung ibang medyo relevant ngayon specifically would be the expert or professional model, no? Which is where the life of the disabled person basically revolves around interventions by experts and specialists. Okay? Medyo nilapit ko siya sa medical model kasi medyo magkamag-anak sila. In fact, ang framework ng disability study specifically ay humanities rather than clinical, no? On the right side, you have things na, again, medyo relevant to the disabled. Empowering model, identity model, minority model. So people do claim disability as identity, no? As well as possibly related to how we view, for example, other marginalized people. No? Next slide. So some issues of representation dahil nga malawak ang landscape. Meron, for example, yung person first language versus identity first language. So every now and then I might say the autistic character, no? And that's not necessarily a bad thing, especially if self-advocates no actually call themselves that. And so, meron ding issue between allies/advocates versus self-advocates. May hashtag ng actually autistic, no? Kasi nga minsan, para bang mas nangingibabaw yung boses ng mga allies kaysa dun sa mismong actually autistic na people. And then there's also the problem of, representation in terms of when you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism versus the actual lack of diverse text. So halimbawa, kung isa lang ang librong pinublish na tungkol sa ganitong condition, isipin ng mga tao na ito lang yung meron. So meron ganun parang inevitability. And then finally, stereotypes. No? Does the text perpetuate or transcend or resist them? Okay, next slide. This is just an example of Someday Birds. No, yung author talked about finding the right voice. No, and she talked about all the research that went into it, but in the end, Charlie's voice appeared. The protagonist's voice just appeared. No, so meron din ganong parang pwede nating tingnan sa proseso, anong madudulot ng lahat ng research versus nabuhay ba talaga para sa'yo yung taong nire-represent mo. Which brings us to the next one, the question of agency. No? When it comes to, kasi medyo educational minsan yung takbo ng mga inclusion literature, so it's perhaps more important to move away from didactic teaching into the realm of meaningful human experience, no? Focusing on the person and the story. And then specifically, pag sibling narratives daw, like the sample manuscript, comparing their potential for choice, no, the person with disability and the sibling, yun yung ideal na mangyayari sa isang narrative. Hindi yung naiiwanan, kumbaga, yung person with disability. In the next slide, it's a very short book, no, sample lang. There's a Duende in My Brother's Soup by Lara Sagisag, which it's very short, pero it has the focalizer as the sibling. In the beginning, the sister resents the autistic brother, bratty, annoying, inconsiderate, may sariling mundo, lahat na, no? And then the parents introduce autism. Akala nung character ay pangalan ng duwende na nandun sa soup on which the brother is fixating. Pero it turns out, yun nga, mas na-gets niya later on. And then what's important in this book is that small gestures and decisions have big implications. So ang resolution niya, spoiler, ay she decides to play beside him regularly kahit hindi siya pinapansin, and then one day he touches her hand, and then it becomes a way of playing together, kahit very different from the way other siblings usually play. Which brings us to considerations. Next slide. Okay, next slide po. Yeah. Character. So gusto kong reiterate that when we create characters, there are dimensions and aspects that we might want to consider. So physical, psychological, sociological dimensions. Pero syempre, pag first person ang narrator, minsan yung physical hindi yan super mahirap i-describe. Alam mo na ma-describe yung sarili mo in the voice. Pero at least we have to see evidence of interiority and sociality. Kaya mahalaga rin yung psychological and sociological dimensions. And then same thing with aspects, desire, obstacle, destiny. Every character has a desire, an obstacle, and a destiny, and usually it's the opposing desires that create the conflict. So for example, what is Daniel's desire? What is Matty's desire? Is Daniel's desire the obstacle to Matty's achieving his desire, or is Daniel himself the obstacle? How does the text portray that? And in the end, what are Matty and Daniel's respective destinies? Resolution and aftermath of conflict lang yan, if you refer to the traditional plotting. Which brings us to some issues about plot that we might want to look at. So remember, there's linear and non-linear being the basic, pero siguro balikan ko yung sinabi ni Dr. Butch Dalisay yesterday about asking the question, is the narrative line compelling? Kumbaga, So I guess sa lahat ng kwento, pwedeng tanungin yon. Sa non-linear, siguro, is that something that we have to consider as well, Pero, so there are advantages and disadvantages, So here are some questions you might ask of, hey, I'm Matty. What is the story? Why choose non-linear over linear plotting? How is the autistic brother depicted? Tapping into stereotypes. I mean, isang medyo toxic na stereotype talaga when it comes to PWDs is the PWD as a burden to the family, as the source of all conflict. And then, who is the target audience and why? Nabanggit kanina ni Sir Roland na ito ay mahalagang tanong, lalo na kung advocacy ang issue. So marami pang pwedeng erase, pero in the meantime, yun po muna. So I'll give the floor to Teacher Georgie talaga yung motto, to Miss Georgie Reynes Santos.
Gandang umaga sa inyong lahat. Thank you, Miss Ana, sa lecture. Kailangan ko po yun. Siguro mapag-usapan pa later. As Miss Ana mentioned, I'm a special education teacher and a literacy teacher, known as Teacher Georgie for many. Creative writing is more intuitive for me because barely did I have training for it, other than two creative writing courses that I took as electives. But I draw most of my experience as a teacher, as a reader, and as a friend to many of these neurodiverse individuals and their families, and also from the various workshops that I have joined. As Miss Ana has mentioned, my work Hates Me Matty is the story of a boy, 10-year-old boy who has a brother with developmental condition, autism spectrum disorder. And as she has mentioned, a few years ago, 2 years ago, my book Inside Daniel's Head was published. It was supposed to be a story told from the point of view of Daniel, the one who was in the spectrum, and his brother, a typical younger brother. But in the end, the story became told perspective of Daniel. So this time, I thought that I felt that the sibling story was also something important and compelling. And this is the reason why, bakit ko ba pinipilit ang sarili kong magsulat? Ang hirap-hirap magsulat. Parang gano'n. So, una, siguro, as a teacher, nakita ko na merong gap talaga sa mga sa literature, no, for children. Hindi lang naman dito sa atin, pero kahit sa ibang bansa. Here sa atin, medyo nagkakaroon na ng iilan ng mga story or picture books, story books for children. Pero when it comes to the intermediate reader, parang halos wala pa. Okay, so kaya naisip ko, at kailangan naman na siya, hindi naman parang there for me there was also a need for chapter books exploring on this themes, no, or topics. Ang pangalawa, so dito I think pumapasok yung advocacy, is yun nga, meron akong mga boses na gustong maiparinig at maintindihan ng iba. So hindi lang naman yung boses nga nung may mga disability, pero pati rin yung mga nasa paligid nila. Kasi sa trabaho ko rin, I also had like organized siblings workshop, at lumalabas na they are often taken for granted, in the sense na neglect kasi nga mas kailangang pansinin yung kapatid nila. Pangalawa, parang bata pa sila, nabibigay na yung burden sa kanila na kahit younger sila, alagaan mo kuya mo, alagaan mo ate mo. So may mga ganon, no? And they have a lot of questions, they have a lot of fears. They also, so I feel that their situation is also very unique and special. Parang dahil dito ang goal ko sana, of course, is madala, no, maisali sila sa usapan ng diskurso ng disability at ng diversity, at para maging bahagi ng solusyon, o maipakita na kung minsan ang problema ay nasa isip ng mga ibang tao, hindi mismo na nasa taong may kondisyon, no, kagaya ng binanggit kanina ni Miss Ana, medical model, social model, individual, environment, relationship. Okay, so ganon. Sa unang akda ko, yung Inside Daniel's Head, sa aking palagay, kung meron man akong na-achieve doon, it was to give that voice, to give Daniel that voice, na marinig siya, makita na ang autism spectrum ay spectrum disorder, at iba-iba siya. So gusto kong maipakita na may iba na kagaya ni Daniel, hindi siya yung usual na non-verbal. So yun yung nais kong maipakita at maiparinig. So feeling ko na-achieve ko yung marinig. Pero in retrospect, and as I was reflecting also on my work, feeling ko doon naman ako nagkulang sa yung marating yung pag-empower, yung mas maisulong yung aking advocacy nga for inclusion. Kasi hindi ko alam kung naintindihan ba at hanggang sympathy lang at hindi empathy ang marating, or feeling ko mismong yung character ko, si Daniel, hindi ko siya na-empower doon sa una kong akda, na gusto ko sanang marating na ma-empower sila ngayon, lalo na yung kapatid. So yun yung hamon ko sa sarili sa akdang ito na may itawid yun. pangatlong dahilan kung bakit ko pinipilit pangatlong concern ko sa akdang ito ay yung pagsusubok no ng form na ginawa ko siyang blog kasi inisip ko ang hirap ma-hook ng mga kabataan magbasa, kailangan maiksi, pero so and then sila yung generation na mahilig mag-YouTube, mahilig mag-surf ng internet. So parang ano ba ang pwede kong mai-relate doon? So kaya ko siya ginawang vlog. Naisip ko nga dapat mas bagay ngayon yung vlog and gaming, pero hindi ko pa maisip kung paano ko yun gawin. Kaya I settled with the form na vlog. Okay, so that's where I am, and those are my concerns also when it comes to my work. I'm hoping that this workshop would provide me that direction in the execution, because I feel like and Sister Vim Cabo na-mention niya na the content is there, the story is there. So ang kailangan ko or ang malaking problema ko is the execution, no, on how to balance all this na gusto kong mangyari, but at the same time being true to the story of these people in this unique situation, being respectful and being true to the advocacy of inclusion. So yun yung mga concerns at and I think ang isang malaking balakid sa pagsusulat ko ay sarili ko, because I tend to like overthink, and to the point na kung minsan marami din akong hindi nakikita, so ayun, at yung the insecurity, I guess, no, of having to tell a story in a way na babasahin ng target audience ko would be yung 10 years and up na mga kabataan, kasi feeling ko sila yung kailangan din mamulat, at sila na yung next generation na kailangan mamulat, na lumaki sila na it's part of life, it's part of their environment, hindi kakaiba, kundi lahat tayo ay may pagkakapareho at may pagkakaiba. So kung ano naman yon, so parang way of life lang siya talaga, part of life. So yun yung gusto kong marating sana. Yun lang. Maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat, Miss Georgie. Okay, so kung pwede na tayong tumungo doon sa discussion sa ACDA. Syempre, makakatulong lalo na kung nabasa niyo yung unang libro. Again, dahil lang pareho sila ng mundo. Pero kahit hindi niyo nabasa yung unang libro, syempre, andito yung manuscript, no? On which you can base comments or questions on. So, pwede bang malaman kung merong, sinong gustong mauna? Siguro, again, fellows muna. Ano yung mga naisip natin or gustong itanong, no, tungkol dun sa ACDA? Or kahit diretso kay Georgie. Miss Georgie, mas gusto niyo bang sagutin agad yung mga tanong o points, or pagkatapos na lang?
Pwede rin pagkatapos na lang.
Okay. Alright. So take notes na siguro. Alright. So sino pong gustong mauna? Pag hindi ko po kayo makita, sa fellow muna? Meron po ba sa fellows? Kung wala po,
si Kate.
Si Miss Kate. Kate?
Hi, Teacher Georgie. Hi, Anna. And good morning. I just have to explain a little bit first before I continue with what I would have to say about the execution, which is what you wanted more feedback on. I have a son, and he has he has a disorder, and now he's coping. He's also around. He's 12 years old, so it's around the same age in the story. And while now it's easy, I mean it's easier. Things were a little bit more difficult early on. So there was a lot of therapy, and I was quite involved with the, I guess, the online community, just to find some meaning to that kind of to that situation. So that's just to say that I really appreciate this sort of giving voice. That's this advocacy to give voice to those that are typically not heard, and in particular the ones who are the siblings. I thought that was I think it's a very important story to tell, because those with the disabilities tend to be heard just because they throw a tantrum or they have a meltdown or whatever. They can be heard in some ways. Whether they're understood or not is a different matter. But in terms of the sibling, you're right. You were saying in your poetics that they're expected to understand, even if they're not yet mature enough to understand, and they're expected to accept and to be mature. So that said, I really, really appreciated that. I really appreciated advocacy. Just in terms of execution, personally, and these are just my thoughts. Please disregard if it doesn't make sense to you. For short story, I tend to hope that the conflict is introduced early. You had your first scene, and it was the friendship, and that's important. I'm fine with that. It's just that somehow I felt that the introduction of his brother should have been early on, very, 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 very early on. It could have been just a thought like, oh, I have to go home now because we have to pick up someone from therapy, something like that. It's just a throwaway line, just a hint of that conflict, early introduction, because not everyone would have read the first book that you've already written. Second is on consistency of structure. I know you used blog posts, but sometimes you break it. And then there are times when you just say, in school later, or something like that. So those little tidbits that I feel they could be improved. I think there's a way to manage the structure. It's either you have to make it more consistent, or like every other one is real time, I guess, and the other one is a blog, and then you decide how it's going to be shown, which ones will be real time, which ones would be blog. That could be something that that you could use, or you could just kind of like make it a little bit more logical. Sometimes I was confused. There was one particular blog that suddenly went into real time, like this is what actually happened based on the blog, and it threw me off, and I felt manipulated because I already saw the emotions of Matty, and then when we went to the scene, I'm reading those emotions. I felt manipulated. So that's just something that you may want to consider. It's either you do the actual scene or you do the blog. That's my recommendation. Just another thing, you already mentioned in your poetics actually, because I do have a son and I do interact a lot with his classmates, and gaming is such a big deal for them. So Fortnite, it might be something that you may want to consider when you're in doing your the telling details, I guess, because that makes a layered characterization. Right now, I felt the characterization of the sibling was defined by his brother. But there must be, aside from basketball, which was what was mentioned, there must be something, I guess I want to know more about the brother, a bit more a layered understanding of him that is separate or not just defined by the brother, so that I feel the loss, I feel the connection or the loss of the connection even more. Just also on another thing, I personally did not feel it that satisfying in terms of the resolution of the parents when they would just comment and say, after the blog, and then the parent just said, "Oh, I'm so sorry," or something like that. I felt that it's unsatisfying. I guess that's my best thing. I felt it was too easy. There must be, of course, I know there's a lot of things going on in your head, and you have to manage how will the parents know and how to make that situation more resonant. But just personally for me, I just felt it was too easy, And the way it's written, even, I'm sorry, this is gonna sound so shallow, but the formatting, it's so easy to miss such an important closure. When I was reading it, I don't know if you had any choice in terms of the formatting, but it was so easy to miss that kind of, it's a very pivotal part of the story. I felt that acceptance of the parents that, you know, our other son, our younger son, is actually also suffering. I think that's a keynote that needs to be emphasized to be more satisfying and a little bit more difficult to reach. Anyway, so, but thank you for doing this advocacy, and please continue. Congratulations.
Maraming salamat, Kate. Emphasize ko lang yung bring up ni Kate na, ano bang klaseng bata si Matty, no? Kasi kaya rin niraise ko yung issue ng character doon sa introductory lecture kasi yung napansin ko doon sa unang libro, pag-characterize kay Daniel mainly, and I really wanted to get to know, you know, these kids, no? They're the characters kasi in the book. Pero for the most part, I still feel like Daniel was defined by, you know, the interventions necessary for the disability. Even though there are fixations and feelings, I feel like a lot, you know, there could have been something else, and I'm seeing the same thing kay Matty, no? Si Matty rin kasi I defined by apparently that the fact that the brother has a disability, and of course we assume that in the course of the book, no, mareresolve yun. Which brings us to a sample resolution that Kate pointed out, no? Ang laking conflict nun yung sa kapatid, no? Tapos yung intervention ng parents. Tapos yun din kasi napansin ko sa unang libro, parang may mga red flags actually about the parents that weren't confronted or resolved. No? Like for example, I can literally, in the first book, I can literally count the number of times that Daniel was told stop. No? Laging ganon, parang stop this. Tapos ang reaction ni Daniel, which for me was very telling but was never confronted, are you mad? No? Are you mad? Every time nasabihan siyang stop. Pero never talaga na-address yun eh. So I'm left with this question, what kind of parents, no? And they are characters. It's not a judgment or anything, no, God knows. I myself, you know, as a parent, na problema. Pero as characters, you know, what is their relationship to their children? And that is, I think, something that has to be played out a bit more here. Kasi nga, dahil bata itong mga characters, 10 years old lang, 12 years old, malaki talaga yung role ng parents, lalo na in this sort of regular family where both parents are present, that sort of thing. No? So definitely that's something that the author can take a look at, no? Or if you guys would like to add to that, no? Or to other issues. Are there more fellows? I'm looking at the chat box. Meron pa bang fellow na gustong magdagdag at this point? Kasi kung hindi, bigay ko muna yung floor kay Sir Eugene.
Si Raisa Misana.
Ay, si Raisa. Okay. Sorry. Raisa, go ahead.
To my husband.
Naka-mute.
Raisa, makiki-unmute
Raisa.
po.
Okay, wait.
Ay,
Naka-mute po kayo, Ma'am Raisa.
makiki-unmute po, Raisa.
Yan.
Ayan.
Okay.
Okay.
Look, I don't know what keeps it. Wait, now the volume is too loud. Okay, I don't really feel comfortable talking about the spectrum because I don't really have direct experience with that. So I just talk about well, one legal thing I just want to point out is that a 10-year-old cannot legally have his own email address, FB account, or a blog. So how did he have it? Okay, did he just lie, or did someone, his parents, older brother, help him? Because that will also tell you something about the family relationship. Okay, and whether they know about his blog or not. Because I think if he's gonna spill all this stuff about his brother, would his parents be comfortable about that? You know naman how Filipino families are. And then other thing is about trends, as Kate pointed out. Online gaming is such a big thing in interacting among kids now. So that would be a good thing to put in. And I don't know if you want to involve Daniel in that too. And the other is about trends in middle grade. Because I think Daniel was 12 to 13 in the first book. But Matty is younger. So if this is going to be a sequel, parang medyo baliktad, because kids usually read older, and in the next book they'd be old. The characters and the kids, the readers, are also older. But here it's the reverse. So the character is younger. The main character is younger. So I guess you have to think about whether this would be a sequel or a companion book, where they don't have to be in order or even read together. And yeah. So wait, there was one more thing I forgot what it was. Sorry. What was that? It had to do with that also, that trends in using the blog. So do you want to make the blog something that's different in style from his regular narrative? Because I don't see the need to be switching between the two. Could you just make it all blog? Kasi confessional na kasi yung first person mode. So why is there another layer of the blog? Of course, that one is presented with more consciousness of your audience. But who's his audience anyway? Isn't it about the same? Just confessing is not really conscious of this audience. Okay. So those are some things I just was thinking about.
Okay. Thank you, Raisa. Oh, magandang point yung ni-raise tungkol sa trends, no, sa middle grade novels like these chapter books. Tsaka also, maganda nga rin i-clarify. Siyempre, I've been using the term sequel, pero what if companion book nga lang siya? Because one of the incidents here in the manuscript, again, actually parang siya yung other side, the Matty point of view dun sa libro. No? So yeah, it's something that Ms. Georgie can later clarify. No? Thank you. Can I give the floor? Meron pa bang fellow right now? Or can I go to some of the panelists muna? Punta ako kay Sir Eugene. Sir Eugene, the floor is yours.
Magandang umaga, Professor Sanchez, at magandang umaga, Teacher Georgie. Salamat sa inyong magandang mga presentasyon, sa introduksyon at sa pagpapakilala ng inyong akda. Excited na akong mabasa, no, ang nakalathalang aklat na ito, no, dahil matanda ni Teacher Georgie, isa ako sa mga nagpapirma sa iyo no, sa nakaraang Manila International Book Fair para sa aklat na iyan. Nagpapasalamat ako, no, na mayroong mga manunulat na gumagawa ng ganitong klaseng mga proyekto, no, na kulang no, sa Pilipinas. Una-una sa larangan ng paksa. Bibihira ang tumatalakay ng mga ganitong paksain sa pangitikang pambata dahil nga sa konsiderasyon na kung bibenta ba ito o hindi. No, kasi lagi iniisip ng mga tagapaglathala, no, na kung maibibenta ba ito, no, kung popular ba ang paksa na ito para sa pamilya, sa eskwelahan at sa mga babasa. Pangalawa din, nagpapasalamat ako, no, dahil pinapaunlad nyo yung isang anyo, yung chapter book na tinatawag o yung mga nobelang pambata, dahil muli, kulang tayo sa mga chapter books sa bansa natin dahil karamihan sa mga bumibenta at inalathala ay ang mga anyo ng picture book. At alam ko ni Teacher Georgie, no, talagang picture book talaga ang dami-dami na napag-uusapan ng trends kanina sa Estados Unidos, sa US, talagang meron na talagang krusada at pangihimok sa mga manunulat na sumulat ng mga paksang ganito, no? Mga paksa na tumatalakay sa disibilidad, pumapaksa sa representasyon, sa inclusivity, no? Talaga ito na talaga yung mga keywords o mga hashtag na hinahanap, no, na sa loob ng 5 taon na humihiling talaga ng mga pagbabago sa paglalathala dahil kulang na kulang sa representasyon ng mga tauhan, ng mga bidang tauhan na simpatetikong tumatalakay sa kanilang buhay, tumatalakay sa kanilang mga problema, mga pinagdadaanan sa mga pang-araw-araw na pamumuhay. Kaya nga, meron tayong movement, no, sa US pala, di pala sa atin, no, yung We Need Diverse Books, pati yung mga Own Voices series. Ngayon, ang gusto kong, ang mga nais kong sabihin ay mga mungkahi, mga dapat pag-isipan, no, tungkol sa pagsusulat o pagtatapos ng proyektong ito. Una ay, pwede natin pag-isipan, no, nabanggit ito kayo na ni Raisa, no, yung blog. Yung anyo ng blog para sa isang grade 4 na mag-aaral, ay baka magkaroon ng privacy issue, no, sa eskwelahan o sa totoong buhay, no? Kasi sa UP, sinabihan kami na bawal ka mag-post ng mga Zoom meeting, mga Pero ito, no, bata, minor, tapos ang teacher papagawan pa sila ng blog, ng napaka-personal, autobiographical na mga pyesa para sa blog. Baka medyo magkaroon ng magkaroon ng problema sa mga mababasa, lalo sa mga guro, sa mga gatekeepers sa Panditikang Pambata, magkaroon ng problema ganyan, baka mamaya ay hindi na ito tangkilikin yung aklat natin. So pag-isipan natin iyon. At ang naisip kong pwedeng sagot, no, imbis na blog, ay medyo corny, pero tanggap na to, marami ng mga tradisyon ng Panditikang Pambata na gumagamit ng diary, no, bilang paraan ng paglalabas ng obserbasyon, ng sama ng loob, nagpapakita ng ano ba yung mga pinagdadaan ng mga tunggalian, mga internal, external tunggalian ng isang ng isang tauhan, no. Gusto kong i-rekomenda itong kompanyo na libro ng Wonder. Teacher Georgie, alam niyo po ba ang Wonder ni R.J. Palacio, no? Na tungkol ito sa isang bata na mayroong disfigurement sa mukha. Tapos tungkol to sa bata na yun, pero yung mga kabanata, bawat kabanata naghahalinhinan, iba't ibang pagtingin ng mga kaklase, kapatid, no? Kapitbahay, bully, no? Doon sa bata na yon. So merong iba't ibang mga pagtanaw, no, na hindi lang nakafocus sa iisang tauhan, no. Pangalawa, nais ko ipunto, no, bukod sa blog din, pwede siguro mga journal na mas creative sa anyo ng comics, no. Meron akong papakita sa inyo isang, nakikita niyo po ba? New Kid, isa sa mga paborito kong aklat pambata ngayon. Confessional, nagpapakita ng racism, napahaba yata ang usapan ko. Sige, bibisan ko na lang. Basta, isa itong, mamaya pwede po tayo mag-usap mamaya, Teacher Georgie, no?
Sir, hindi po parinig yun,
sorry. Na, ang ginamit ng batang tauhan dito ay yung nagdo-drawing siya, no? Na hindi lang puro essay, hindi lang puro pasulat, no, na pinapakita niya yung mga struggle niya ng mga maliliit na mga diskriminasyon na pinagdadaanan ng bata sa loob sa middle school, no. So pwedeng gamitin to bukod sa journal kasi fotografiya, kanta, no. At nakita ko rin dito, teacher, na kung ako ang publisher, pwede kitang sabihan na, Teacher Georgie, pwede bang ang aklat mo ay pwede ring maging isang creative writing manual o isang aklat tungkol sa creativity, no, na nagkukwento ka, tapos sa isang banda mayroong character ng teacher na binibigyan sila ng mga assignment, tapos tinuturuan yung mga bata na maglabas ng kanilang mga saloobin sa pamamagitan ng mga creative works na hindi lang pasulat, na pwedeng sketch, pwedeng mga kanta, no. So no, dagdag na pambenta yan, merong non-fiction na component ang iyong aklat. Pangatlo, no, tansyahin din natin yung wika ng isang grade 4 na estudyante. No? Nung binasa ko tong manuskrito mo, napaka-sophisticado ng prosa na parang ikaw na mismo ang sumusulat ng mga blog entries. So, ano yan, baka mamaya mas maikli. Ayoko naman sabihin pag bata, hindi sophisticado magsulat. No? Pero yung tansyahin natin, ano ba yung bokabularyo ng isang bata, ano ba yung kanyang mga pang-araw-araw ng mga hinaharap sa buhay. Pang-apat ay ihanda mo rin yung mga readers. No? Siguro ito yung panghuli kong punto. Ihanda mo ang mga readers sa paglalagay ng mga blog. Kasi minsan, gusto yung sa Patsang Diun, nabigla ko doon, bakit meron ganitong blog entry? Ihanda mo kami, no, sa pamamagitan ng mga naratibo, no, mga techniques sa naratibo na maglalabas na ako ng isang blog entry dito para sa eksenang ito. Muli, pagbati sa iyong proyekto at sana ay makita ulit tayo sa iyong susunod na book signing.
Maraming salamat po, Sir Eugene. Dagdag ko lang, sabi ni Raisa, sinusugan niya yung idea na books with doodles are very popular now nga. In fact, Inside Daniel's Head had all of these very cute graphics na hopefully in the second book, ma-maximize din, lalo na kung explore yung form. And then there's pag-clarify ni Christine Nitinlao, may mga blog that are closed for school audience only. So actually may workaround pala yung parang privacy restriction na issue. Okay? All right. So next, I give the floor to Sir Butch for his comments.
Yes, salamat, Anna. These will not be technical points because they've already been raised. And besides, I don't really know a thing about YA literature, although I wanted to comment because I found the piece very interesting dahil may ganito kaming sitwasyon sa aming bahay. Yung dalawa naming apu-apuhan, one of them is a girl who's 10 years old and then a boy who's 4. The kids of our housekeeper were very close to us. Parang adopted mga apo na namin yon. The elder girl is severely autistic, and the younger brother, who is, they're both very dear to us. But what I wanted to observe from their relationship, as I've seen it over the years, is that the younger brother, they have their arguments and everything and fights, but the younger brother seems to understand that the elder sister is different. Sasabihin niya matter-of-factly, si ate hindi marunong salita. So that there are many moments of tenderness between them. Maybe it's not meant that way, pero talagang, when they share food and he takes care of her, parang ata pa, alam na niya, she's going to be my responsibility when we grow up. So I was kind of looking for even those inadvertent moments of tenderness between the siblings, on top of all the predictable tensions that come with this relationship. And annoying kuya lagi tawag niya, and sure, he's annoying, but I would guess that there are moments when he understands intuitively his superiority in some ways and his responsibility toward his kuya. So maybe the narrative can open itself to those possibilities. Ayun lang.
Thank you, sir. Actually, realistically, when you look at families with special needs, mine being one as well, very intense, sure, yung conflict, pero very intense din yung joys. No? Yung tenderness nga na sinasabi. And yeah, I have been looking for that as well. So thank you for emphasizing that. Let's go to Sir Bowman.
Magandang umaga. Salamat sa Georgie sa kwento na yun. Nag-enjoy ako sa pagbabasa, no? At siguro may mga comment kanina ay ay siguro mas dagdag ko na lang tungkol halimbawa sa vlogs. Ano? Yung tanong ko lang ay, of course, iba pa yung usapin kung okay bang vlog yung form o hindi. No? Pero may mga vlogs kasi na published and unpublished, explicitly nakalagay doon sa teksto na itong vlog na to unpublished. Ano? Iba naman published. So, ang tanong doon ay, itong mga published and unpublished material ba, meron ba silang role in the dramatic development of the story? At kung ganun, paano sila magkakaroon ng papel? Halimbawa, yung knowledge, halimbawa, ng mga unpublished blogs. Kailangan ba yung knowledge na yun o yung para bang mga monologue lang ito ng character, no? Na magpapaliwanag ng kanyang susunod na mga pagkilos, pag-isip, ano? Sa loob ng kwento. Also, yung question nga ng paano yung decision ng published at unpublished blog? Bakit siya nag-decide na itong blog na ito ay hindi ko ipapublish, ano? Malinaw na ito dito yung case na nababanggit nila kung sa privacy na may mga lalabas na yung mga unpublished blogs kasi ay particularly may negative feel, ano? Kumbaga, bakit nanggagaling ito mismo sa bata yung kanyang desisyon, ano? Kumbaga, hindi ko sinasabi na imposible yung mangyari yun, no? Pero baka meron sigurong hindi naman ito censorship din ng iba, no? Pero siguro may pag-isipan natin yung ano yung kanyang mga desisyon. Paano ginagawa yung desisyon na ito, ipapublish na ito, hindi, no? Iba pa yung usapin kung talagang yun, kung blog talaga yung karapat-dapat na form. Yung isa na lang na comment na pwede ko sigurong pinag-iisipan ko, no? Yung isang importanteng bonding doon sa kanilang pamilya. So maghalos is like almost like their the most social kind of bonding is music, ano? Diba? Dahil ito yung nagagawa nila ng sama-sama, ano? Kaya siguro ang tingin ko dito ay pwedeng pag-aralan, ano? Sa mga batang may autism, ano? Ano yung elemento ng music, ano, doon sa halimbawa, pagtugon doon sa ganung klaseng kondisyon. O kaya, ano yung mga kakayahan ng mga batang may autism na tumugtog ng mga instrumento. Alam ko na may mga autistic children na virtuoso, no, particular instrument. Pero yung usapin ng guitar, baka isip ko, and I did look around, ano, ano yung mga pinaka-suggested instruments for autistic children. Guitar isn't one of them, ano? Kasi it's hard to hold, and you can really play, you can make wrong notes, no, very easily with the guitar, no. So usually recommend mga bongo or kaya mga ukulele, ano. In fact, if you play ukulele wrong, it doesn't sound bad. It sounds like a nice instrument pa rin. It sounds like it's in tune, ano. Pero guitar is something else, ano. Samantalang kanyang kuya likes playing the cajon, ano. Tingin ko, it might require, since yung music is one of the basis for sociality in that family. You know? And tatakayan ako ano yung mga songs na they can play together. No? Do they play songs about dinosaurs together or stuff like that? No? Hindi ko sure. No? Ano ba yung mga tuloy-tuloy na kay Beatles or something like that? I mean, that also reflects. I mean, that's a very poignant thing for a child to have a certain favorite songs, you know, and that says something about that makes us identify too with that child, you know. So I think pwede pang flesh out in the aspect, no, and particularly, I think we should think about the instrument. Because if this character is based on a real child, no, somebody who does that, okay, but make sure you flesh out in detail. Pero kung ordinary reader ka and you think about the difficulties in playing instruments. Guitar is really one of the easiest ones. Keyboard is rather easier, to play. So alam ako din na down dito, no? That it's less that when you pick up something, much easier to make music from that. So you think about it, yung music as a central socializing element in that family. And maybe pwedeng ma-develop pa yun. Lalo na, malaking interest ni Maki sa pagtugtog. So, pag-isipan lang yun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you po sa suggestion. Magandang punto po. Okay, so bigay po natin yung floor kay Sir Vim. Kay Sir Vim.
Pala ako. Hello. Yung anak ko pala si Awit, may global developmental delay. Kaya lang parang sinagip na kami ng Diyos kasi kinuha na niya siya nung 4 na taong gulang. No? Pero nakikita ko nga yung sarili ko dito sa sitwasyon dahil kung lumaki siya, malamang maging kagaya rin to nung tauhan no, Teacher Joji. Ang naalala ko lang ay nung kaibigan si Cyrus Borja, kapag malungkot siya, nung sinusulatan niya yung sarili niya. Pero dahil 90s pa ito, yung pagbalik ng sulat, sinusulatan niya yung sarili niya, iba na yung kanyang pakiramdam, iba na yung kanyang damdamin, iba na kanyang mood. No, kumbaga, ito ang nagagawa nung kapag sinusulat mo yung nararamdaman mo. Kaya may tinatawag nga tayo, bilang dagdag dito sinabi ni Sir Eugene, yung feeling journal. No? Pwedeng, ang nag-articulate yung kanyang kapatid, na kahit bunso ay mas nakakaunawa o nakakaintindi. Tapos bukod dito sa araw-araw kaya daily nga diurna. Ito mga halimbawa yung feelings journal no na kung anong nararamdaman mo, pwede ngang kung di man doodle kahit symbol lang no or kung anong bagay kahit nga yung mga tape, yung mga art objects no na pwede mong gamitin no doon sa journal niya no na ang nagpapaliwanag, nag-articulate si Bunso, no? Tapos naisip ko rin yung halimbawa, yung pagsimpleng papamasyal sa labas, no? Mas mahalaga kasi alam ni Teacher Ana yan yung mga stimulus, no? Dapat maraming stimuli no para sa senses niya. Tapos yung bawat karanasan mahalaga no para sa kanyang development. So yung paunti-unti at alam mo yan teacher, alam mo naman yan dahil ikaw ay eksperto mismo. Kaya gusto kong explore pa yung sinabi rin ni Bomin, yung paggamit ng iba't ibang art forms, no, bukod sa musika, movement, no, yung movement, mahalaga yung movement kasi hindi man dance talaga, yung movement lang, no, na therapeutic, no. At marami tayong pwedeng pagbatayan diyan. Ng mga prinsipyo, pwedeng qigong, tai chi, at kung ano-ano pang may chi no, or energy. Yun lang. Sumausaw lang ako. Salamat.
Maraming salamat.
Thank you, sir. Sir, buti hindi kayo umiyak kasi baka umiyak.
Ayun nga. Actually, nagpipigil ako kaya hapon. Hindi na kami nag-usap tungkol dyan dahil kaya iyak ko lang
diba?
Doon sa tatlong bata. Sige.
Doon sa isa. Oo nga pa. Thank you, sir. Sir Roland po, the floor is yours.
Remember, wala pang quotas ang iyak si Vim ngayong araw na to. Kaya forthcoming yan within the day.
Oo.
Anyway, sa akin ay yung ang ko dahil longer piece naman ito, may central characters at central course of actions. Hindi ko mag-sense yung timetable ba, yung time frame. Hindi ba katulad sa Bisperas, malinaw, may imminence na kung saan magaganap yung story. Dito parang slice of life, a day or a week or a month in the life of, and could it be any month? So I was looking forward na para mas may challenge din kay Georgie na lagyan ng a kind of 3 weeks ba to bago mag-birthday or kung ano man. Basta lang may something of a kind of quest that can help set up yung narrative trajectory na gusto niyang i-plot, no? And there are things that can unravel and also thicken the descriptions or the empathy for the characters, no? Sa pagtapos yung other side, parang may clear dichotomy din ako nasa-sense dito brother, older brother, younger brother, developmental problem, parang caregiver of sorts. Yung parang parang hindi ko na nagigets yung a kind of synergy, a kind of disjunct din ng relationship nila, which is typical of younger one. Parang sana mas ma-deepen pa na may konting dramatic development points naman din sa story nila rather than makakatulong ako may overall trajectory yung story, yung novel na to or kung ano man ito. And then yung sociality din, parang walang newness din na pinapasok. It's just family, it's just two siblings, school, parang baka naman ma-interject ito kung masikan din ng sociality. May playmate ba sa labas or underclass playmate for more interesting, anak ng magbabakal bote or something, para lang medyo enrich yung plot development din. And then ako, parang agree ako na dapat may online gaming. If that's the fascination of a lot of kids na may ganitong klaseng condition, mga pwedeng i-visualize din how can that be possible in terms of being also implanted into a kind of tool para mga develop both in terms of their relationship and also in terms of yung narrative trajectory. So baka kailang imagine mo or consult ka ng isang book designer that you're comfortable with on how to possibly visualize this in a printed book format, or kung e-book ito, baka mas madali siyang gawin.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Okay, so may mga suggestions. Andun yung issue ng emplotment, no? Magandang suggestion yung parang underclass na character kasi nga very middle class, well-to-do pa nga kasi ang daming opportunities, ang daming kaya, no, na i-access ng pamilyang ito eh. So actually, yeah, it will expand the world if we transgress that kind of isolation within that class, no?
Ano kasi
so maganda rin pong punto. Opo, Sir Vin.
O kasi naalala ko lang, hindi naman ang special cases.
Yan na.
Madali lang to. Yung giftedness, kasi parang nagmabanggit kasi yung social class eh. Pag sinabing gifted, parang pangmayaman lang. No? Member ako ng Philippine Center for Gifted Education. At yung kagaya rin, yung pag special child ba, pangmayaman lang? Hindi eh. Diba? So baka yung kung meron kang proyekto din ito, pwedeng basagin mo na itong special child cases or giftedness cases, pwedeng hindi pang mayaman lang, no? Kasi nagiging napakahalaga nun na kaya tuloy, yung therapy, yung pagpapagaling sa kanilang anak, hindi para sa kanila kasi pang mayaman lang. Paano kung may ganyan silang anak? Diba? Siguro pwede mong isa yung teacher, Joji, naging advocacy na, no, kaya sinalin ko nga yung giftedness bilang yung pantas. Pero sabi na pang matatanda yan eh. Siguro isa pang dapat basagin din. Pwedeng yung pantas bata, no? Yun lang.
Yung issue ng
alala
access,
ko lang. Oo, totoo yun, di ba? Kaya iba parang deprived, no? Hindi na pinagkakaitan no, na ng tulong kasi yun nga, may ginagawa silang batas ngayon sa Kongreso, no? Pero hindi naman tayo kinukonsulta. No?
Thank you, sir. Meron pa po ba ang gustong humabol, lalo na po sa fellows? Meron tayong gustong i-share?
Graded recitation ka na, Ana, yung mga hindi pa sa tawagin.
Ayan, si Glenn. Feeling ko may gustong sabihin si Glenn.
Oo. Maraming gumaganon lang eh.
Oo nga. Glenn, Tin, may gusto kayong idagdag?
Attorney, baka yung mga batas na may kilalaman.
Attorney.
Ayaw talaga. Kanina ko pa sa kinukulit.
Sir, retired na po ako.
Oo, kasi makakatulong eh.
Wala, Tin. Tin.
Bilang nanay din, no?
Yan, yay.
Bilang nanay, mahalaga yung diskurso ng yun nga, disabilities dahil, yun nga, marami naman sa atin, kita nga dito ngayon sa pag-uusap natin, marami sa ating may karanasan na gano'n sa sarili nating mga pamilya. Kaya mahalaga, napakahalaga yung tinusukan ni Teacher Joji at ang sabi po na sa paglabas ng ganitong klase mga libro ay ibigyan yung boses. bilang mga, hindi man tungkol sa magulang, syempre may representasyon din ng mga magulang at kung paano kahirap na maging magulang, hindi lang para sa isang bata naman may special needs, kundi pati na rin sa mga neurotypical na sibling. Yun. That's it. That's it. Hindi naman that's it. Kundi, yun nga, wala akong naging problema dun sa vlog ni Teacher Joji. Dahil nakita ko rin naman, yung anak ko rin kasi meron din siyang mga needs, special needs. Nakita ko naman kung saan, sa mga paaralan kung saan siya nag-aral, may mga requirement talaga na ginagawa sa forma ng vlog. At ang ginagawa po nila ay closed ito sa klase. Hindi siya 10 years old. Mas matanda siya. Pero yung requirement na to, ini-introduce nila ng maaga-aga. Mga 11, mga 12. So hindi ko alam kung may problema ba. Palagay ko wala naman. Dahil kung nasa LMS naman to, Learning Management System ng isang paaralan, ay magiging bukas ito sa teacher at sa mga kaklase lang at hindi ma-access ng iba. So ang magiging issue dito ay paano ito i-introduce doon sa naratibo. Yun lang naman sa akin. Pero salamat, Teacher Joji, sa intervention na ganito.
Maraming salamat, Christine. Si Ma'am Luna, last na po siguro para maibigay natin yung floor mamaya kay Teacher Joji. Ma'am Luna?
Oo, gusto kong susugan yung sinasabi ni Christine na ang representasyon din ng magulang dito ay vital. Hindi lang sa usapin ng representation sa narrative, pero yung marketing aspect ng young adult, malaki ang ginagampan ng papel ng mga magulang sa pag-purchase ng mga libro. Pero balik tayo dun sa representation ng magulang, batay dun sa nabasa ko dun sa Hey Mati. Ang hindi mawala sa akin, yung image ng nanay, na bandang dulo to ng narrative, na meron siyang hawak na baking equipment yata, tapos nagdi-drip yung butter dun sa libro ng kanyang anak, at parang clueless siya dun sa sitwasyon ng bata. At sa akin, ang laki rin ng burden para dun sa mga magulang na magkaroon ng ganitong offspring, children, kasi in some way, ang autism din genetic eh. At hindi naman lahat ay diagnosed. So, may magandang angulo lang siguro para ma-enrich yung characterization. One of the parents could be an undiagnosed autistic person para mas complex ang dynamic. Pero bahala na si Jonalie dun sa aking suggestion. Salamat.
Apo. So kumbaga positive force ba, negative force, ang parents, pero definitely hindi siya pwedeng nandun lang, no?
Yes.
Meron pang pwedeng gawin yung may akda, no?
Yes.
Sa characters ng parents.
At
Okay. Thank you very much po.
Pasensya na, Ana. Nakakatulong din yan sa education mismo ng mga magulang para makita nila na ito pala yung pinagdadaanan ng mga anak namin.
Maraming salamat po, ma'am. At ngayon, bigyan na po natin yung floor. Balik natin kay Miss Joji. Marami pong suggestions at meron po kayong para final word.
Yes. Okay, maraming salamat sa inyong mga puna at inyong mga suggestion at inyong mga tanong. Ang dami kong kailangan ng gawin. Okay, pero siguro, no, to explain yung mga sinasabi niyo na representasyon ng mga magulang at yung papakila sila, I guess yun nga yung isa sa aking, yung challenge ko sa sarili ko. Kasi nga first person siya, so nahihirapan akong, yun yung hamon ko sa sarili ko kung paano ko maipakita yon sa yung mga kilos ng mga ibang tao at yung kanilang mga motives and feelings ganyan sa mata ng aking mga character. Kasi yung si Mati, 10 years old, yung dati si Daniel, person with autism, so na hindi na mas more on focus sa sarili. So yun talagang isang malaking hamon ko na kailangan. Tapos naalala ko lang yung sabi ata ni Sir Butch kahapon na parang writing is hard. So it's you face it, you don't walk away. And I think parang sa mga nagdaan, parang nag-walk away ako. Dahil yun nga parang nung una kailangan ko ngang the initial story really was supposed to be from different perspectives. Yung sinabi ni Sir Eugene na wonder, sobrang idol ko yun si RJ Palacio. And I really, yun yung peg ko dapat sa una. Pero hindi ko kinaya. Hindi ko siya hinarap at tinuloy. At I chose the easier way, siguro. I mean, yeah, I have to admit, I chose the easier way. So ngayon, yun yung kailangan ko ihamon sa sarili ko na, okay, kailangan ko siyang gawin. If it has to be the hard way, yun. Tapos, doon nga sa yung mga suggestion, kasi iniisip ko rin yung mga diary, yung mga liham, yung mga different forms, no? Kaya lang, nireject ko yun isa-isa noon kasi nga inisip ko mas napapanahon si blog. But maybe I will have to rethink. Naisip ko rin yung may mga drawing. Again, hindi ko na naman siya hinarap kasi hindi nga ako marunong mag-draw. So I guess yun, ito yung mga mga hamon nga na kailangan kong harapin, no? In terms of doon sa trajectory, actually school year siya. So yun yung pag-pace ko at paglalahad ng mga pag-unfold, no, ng mga mangyayari pa at magko-culminate siya sa end ng school year rather. So yun pa yun. At yung mga tender moments ng magkakapatid, yun yung mga wala pa hindi siya pa nasali doon sa excerpt kasi kailangan ko pa siyang ayusin. Feeling ko hindi pa ako naging handa na isali siya. Pero pinag-iisipan ko yon. Tapos ang isa pa na actually inisip ko noon na ngayon I really have to rethink. Alam ko, ako mismo naisip ko na napaka-middle class ng kwento ko. At noon pa man gusto kong kumawala dyan. Kasi nga, hindi nga siya pang isang socio-economic status lang. Pero dahil ginawa ko siya si Daniel, yun na yun. So since ginawa ko siyang parang, hindi siya sequel, by the way. Ang naisip ko, hindi sequel. Kaya actually pwede ko siyang ibahin. Parang ding, again, peg ko nga si RJ Palacio, para din yung kanyang trilogy, hindi siya sequel, pero it's book siya that it can stand alone or pwedeng hindi, pero hindi siya sequel. So parang ganun din yung ideya ko noon. Pero baka yun nga, kailangan ko nga siyang basagin kasi ang daming alam ko na ang daming mga concerns din, no? Lalo na yung mga mahihirapan, yung mga walang access na gusto ko rin sanang maisali. Na hindi ko siya maisali kasi nga nakahon ako doon sa character na who belongs to a middle class family. So, yun yung isang seriously kailangan kong pag-isipan din. Gusto ko lang hindi ko na aabutin yung iba. Pero doon sa musika, gusto ko lang sabihin na kaya ko pinili yung guitar and actually piano and actually drums. Kasi sa naging trabaho ko over the years, ang musika talaga ay napaka-powerful. And in fact, naging social currency siya for many of my non-verbal kids na ang gagaling at ang huhusay nilang tumugtog ng gitara po. Classical and electrical guitar. Okay, so meron kaming pag naging friends tayo, sir, papakita sa Facebook namin, may mga pa-concert kami. So, kaya sadya yon. So, sadya, conscious decision yon na ipakita na kaya nila, may kakayahan. So, parang walang limit pagdating sa kakayahan nila. Kaya ko pinili yon na alam ko mahirap ang gitara, pero nakita ko, at hindi lang iisa, madami sila. Pero again, no, ito yung may mga access ulit. Na may mga access na may kakayahang mag-enroll at magkaroon ng mga coach. So, isang banda rin doon, paano ito matutugunan sa mga walang access. So, yun. Ano pa? May oras pa ba?
30 seconds siguro.
30 seconds?
1 minute.
But anyway, sa lahat siguro sa mga iba pa na hindi ko na nasagot, no? Una sa lahat, kailangan kong pagnilayan at balikan. Kasi again, sabi ko nga, ako nga ang una kong kalaban. Dahil din sa mga komentong to, ang dami kong kailangang pag-isipan. Alam ko kailangan gawin. Pero alam ko rin naman, at the end of the day, kwento ko to at ikukwento ko kung ano yung, kung paano ako komportable siyang ikwento. Pero na malaking pagpapasalamat sa mga inyong mga komento, mga tanong, kasi kailangan kong sagutin para maayos yung aking isda. Sa mga suhestyon, maraming salamat.
Maraming salamat po, Teacher Georgie. Congratulations. Maraming salamat po sa lahat. Diyan po nagtatapos ang session 5. Thank you.
Maraming salamat at pagbati po, Ma'am Georgie, at pagbati din po sa unang 2 sesyon ngayong araw. Bago po matapos ang ating live stream ay inaanyayahan ko po ang lahat ng kasama sa Zoom meeting na buksan ang inyong camera para po sa ating picture taking po. Okay po. Ready na po ba, Sir Joey? One, two, smile. Oh, next. Para po sa ating viewers ay muli nating pansamantala nating ititigil ang palihan upang makapagpahinga at makakain ng mga kasama natin. Magkita po tayo mamayang 2:00 ng hapon para sa session 6, Pacific Theater Screenplay, Filipino ni Hanelin Alipio, at ang ating moderator po dyan ay si Dr. Rolando Tolentino. Para po sa ating viewers, meron po tayong social media pages. Paki-follow na lang po ang ating Facebook. Naka-flash po ngayon sa inyong screen. Please follow facebook.com/upicw, facebook.com/panitikan.ph, and facebook.com/upnww. We also have our workshop blog. That's 59th upnww.panitikan.ph/blog, and we also have our Twitter at upnww. Muli po, magandang tanghali at babalik po kami mamayang 2:00 ng hapon.